the Volvo. For those who don't know, this is my 63 Volvo 122S. Pulled from a barn after it sat for 25 plus years. My son and I swapped a Ford 2.3 liter turbo engine and drivetrain in it, as well as an 8.8 rear diff. After this first summer of it being back on the road and putting the car through its paces, we ended up finding the weak link. And honestly, that's the head gasket. The tune in the micro squirt is running pretty much 18 psi, maybe a spike into about 19-ish. But ultimately, the OEM style head gasket is just not enough. This led to the purchase of a new cam, which was attached to a ported cylinder head, which had a different intake, which is all in hopes to solve some problems and upgrade in the process. As you probably noticed, there's a new Beauport header. This is to replace and upgrade from the center mount header that was very badly cracked. The bottom end is relatively simple. This is just a stock crank, stock rods, stock pistons, stock piston ring gap, but we decided to change the connecting rod bolts to ARP bolts. The decision to keep the bottom end stock is really based off the limitations that we have out of the turbocharger and the potential limitations of this cylinder head. Apparently, these particular cylinder heads are notorious for head gasket failure due to the size of the coolant jackets. Now that said, I didn't want to go for the gusto and change the rods and pistons and then basically have a weak link, which is the back to the cylinder head and the cylinder head gasket. So in lieu of that, save some money for now, but we'll see how durable the head and head gasket are. See where it goes. So we are running undercut ARP head studs and a Felpro 1035 head gasket. No magic here or anything. We're just cleaning out the holes in the block for the head studs. A couple of the holes actually share ports into the water pump, so they do kind of get gunked up, so it's just a good idea to clean them up. So this is a later gen dual plug head from, I believe, a Ford Ranger. And the block is the 86 Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupe block. Changing to this has obviously brought up some new stuff and some big differences, like the alternator bracket, because there's a plug in the way. We can't run the Thunderbird distributor and cap because there's no room. The lower intake runs right into where the cap would be. This means we're going to a distributorless style of ignition system. This meaning we're going to run a cam and crank pickup, as well as individual ignition coils. Now this should be as simple as running a Ranger lower timing cover, so you have the crank pickup. But when you do that, you have to run the Ranger water pump. You run the Ranger water pump and the pulleys are off from the 86 Thunderbird pulleys, which is what this car is set up to be. So in lieu of doing all of that, we went for a kit that's actually available on eBay, and it stacks on top of the factory pulley and spaces it out with its own little bracket and its own dedicated crank sensor. The biggest modification with this kit is cutting down the crank pulley to make up for the size of the tone ring. With this kit comes a distributor / oil pump drive unit. It does have a cam sensor in it, but it's only a single shutter. So I'm not sure how well this is going to work with the micro squirt system. As far as the intake goes, we try to make it as simple as possible. This is a Ranger lower intake that was ported, which is part of the purchase of the cam and the head that I made. The upper is just a D shape from Ross Machine. It's just drilled out in the bottom, so it matches the ports. It's offset slightly. The holes in the bottom of the intake, some of them were threaded, so we basically wanted to put the bolts from the bottom up. We'll see how well this works. We're not totally set in stone on how that's playing out. It might end up being threaded through the threads that are made in the upper intake to come out as studs. That way the likelihood of losing the whole bolt into the intake is minimal. But that's still in progress, so we'll see what really happens. Another thing we're changing this year is we're taking out the 2.5-inch exhaust and we're going to 3-inch exhaust. The car really didn't have that sound, that bite that it should have, that I experienced in the Ranger and the wagon. So yeah, it needs to muscle up a little bit. The big difference this year for putting this engine back in is space. The header is wider. It gets really close to that inner fender, and that intake area, well, we had to make room for it. Let's just put it that way. Lower intake is very straight and it takes up a lot of room. So it's about, I think, 6 inches from where it was last year as far as how much was cut out. Almost square. So there'll have to be some more work made in that firewall, or bulkhead, if you may, to fit this intake, which is okay because it's time to rearrange a whole bunch of stuff. Included in that stuff is the fuel pressure regulator mounted on the back firewall, and then obviously the length of that fuel rail is different. So that means the fuel lines to and from the fuel pressure regulator will be different, as well as the throttle cable. One of the nice things about this header is that wastegate is pointed rearward. Fortunately, I don't have a lot of room there and have to make that wastegate basically put up on a pedestal, but it'll function way better than last year's version. We've definitely been busy putting this combo together and making it work, but we're having fun doing it. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, share. We appreciate the support. Take care.